Hello and welcome to Risk at Work, Risk Connect's educational web series. I'm Scott Fenstermaker. I'm the Vice President of Digital Marketing. Today we're going to be talking about maximizing your RMIS, a comprehensive guide to efficiency and utilization. I don't know how many times this happens to you. I am certainly guilty of this. You have a brand new addition to your tech stack, whatever you're using. It's lovely, brand new piece of software. Maybe it takes a while to implement, but you finally get over that hurdle and you have this thing at your disposal, this brand new toy. But you find that on your way to mastering it, there are two types of dynamics that happen. The people that are in there using it every day, perhaps they are tasked with everyday tasks that tend to repeat themselves. And they're not necessarily looking to exercise imagination as to how this usage can be broadened or made more efficient or more effective. Whereas the people at the director level, maybe the people who thought about buying the software in the first place, tend to go in it for a report here, a report there, a data point here, but don't necessarily find themselves immersed in the software enough to be able to exercise their imagination. They're immersed in 50 different things every single day. And so between the confluence of these, we sometimes miss the opportunity to make sure that this wonderful platform that we have going for us is doing absolutely everything it can for our program. We miss out on a lot of things that make a tangible impact on ROI. So we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about what you can take away from today's session to immediately apply and start getting more efficacy out of your ROI, excuse me, more efficacy out of your RMIS, more measurable ROI, and a lower total cost of risk. And we have a wonderful guest, a first-time guest here at Risk at Work to be able to talk about this information with us. We're very excited to introduce him. Before we do that, as always, a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, if you have any questions for our guest today, please put them into the question field of your webinar software. If we do not answer that question in the midst of our discussion, we will reply to you directly by email with an answer from our guest today. Also, if you indicated that you would like CPE credit for attending today's web session, watch your inbox after we're done here today. You're going to receive a short 3-question quiz. You fill that out, you send that back in, and we will reply to you with your CPE credit. All right, I am very excited to introduce for the first time at Risk at Work. He is the founder and CEO of Red Hand Advisors. I'm sure you probably know this person. He has been around the risk world for a while. He's a very famous face. He was the founding member of Marsh's RMIS software business when they started up. And now he is the creator and co-author of the RIMS report. Excuse me, of the RMIS report. I got to get that right. The RMIS report. I am pleased and proud to have with us at Risk at Work, Pat O'Neill. Pat, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Scott. Yeah, it is the first time. Be kind, be
Oh,
gentle with
as
me.
always, dude, you're in for a good time. We have fun
I
here. The
know.
audience has fun here. It's a good time.
No, I'm looking forward to it, and thanks for having me.
You bet. We're very much looking forward to this. So we're talking about how to get the most out of this wondrous piece of software tool that we've
Yeah.
invested in, and we can't wait to hear from you on this. So please take it away.
Sure, that's great. Thanks again. Yeah, this is a subject that's near and dear to my heart, and something that I spend a lot of time on soapboxes talking about. So I'm excited to talk about it today in a more formal setting. We're going to go over a couple things today that I hope will hopefully will give you takeaways that you can apply to your RMIS and get more out of it. Scott, I think you did a really nice job on the front end there talking about kind of how these systems get implemented and some of the frustrations that people run into. And we're going to talk about those and talk about ways to address that and to get more because I think no matter where you are kind of in the process or value chain of using your system, there's so many opportunities to improve on that. Whether you're a more basic user of these systems, or you'd consider yourself, if if you were self-reporting, you'd say, yeah, we're pretty far along. We're an advanced user. There's always opportunity to get more out of it. So we're going to talk about why it's important. Talk a little bit about where people are generally speaking, and we're going to kind of then break down some of the recommendations through some really basic, I wouldn't, maybe not basic, but daily opportunities, things that you can do that would change kind of the everyday on how you use these systems. And then start talking about kind of some of the more broader opportunities, looking at turning data into insights, using more advanced technologies, and then particularly just we're going to talk about some of the process that I would say is important to make sure you're getting the most out of it. So we'll talk about kind of continuous improvement, and some of the roadblocks that organizations face when they're trying to maximize the value from their RMIS. And then I look forward to answering questions, Scott, from you and from the audience. So yeah, so let's dive in. Um, and one of the things I'm going to share today, you're going to see it on a few of the slides. I'm going to share some research that Red Hand does through our RMIS report annual process. So when you see graphs on the screen, they're going to come from our most recent survey that was done earlier this year, and I'll explain kind of what the graph describes. But know that they all came from that survey of about 1,000 risk and claim professionals who complete our survey each year for the RMIS report. So let's talk about kind of what the basics are, what we're trying to get out of these systems. And I guess a point or a stat that I'd like to point out is that I find that most organizations are only getting less than 50% or using 50% of the capabilities that these systems offer. And that it doesn't mean that everyone has to be at 100%. There are certainly capabilities and functionality that don't apply to every organization. But I would say maybe even a better way to put it is that there's less than 50% of true utilization of these tools. And there's so much more opportunity. This is a pretty basic way to look at it. One of our really early questions we ask in our survey is, what do you use the system for? And this is kind of looking at what we would call modules of the system. We're going to get into other ways to look at this, and functionality, and other capabilities that the systems have. But if you look at module usage, you and couple things pretty obvious, claims management, and I'll just jump real quick to claims administration, kind of two of the key areas that organizations use these systems for. The reason we differentiate it, claims management is when you use the tool as a more of a reporting and aggregation tool. So you're gathering data from your TPAs, your carriers, that's claims management. Claims administration is if you're using your REMIS to administer the claim. So you're maybe self-handling particular lines of coverage, or maybe you're self-handling all your lines. That's the differentiation, and that was the core use of REMIS for so many years. It's obvious that would be our high points in utilization for the different modules. But as we kind of go down the modules and maybe cut ourselves off beyond kind of exposure management, core functionality that a REMIS system offers: incident reporting, policy management, renewal processes, and renewal management, and then exposure and value collection. Those are kind of the key areas of the core REMIS capabilities, although that definition has broadened as well over the years. We drop off pretty quickly when we get out of that claims area, right? When we get out of claims and incident and claim administration, we start to see drops well below 50%. The blue bar shows you kind of current where people are today. I've layered on top of that what our respondents tell us is their expectation to use it. So there's positive momentum that's being shown. Whether we'll see that in actuality year over year, if we'll see the growth in policy and renewal, we get a lot of activity, particularly in the area of renewal and exposure management, from our clients right now. And then if you think about kind of broader, particularly the way Risk Connect looks at the REMIS space, much broadly speaking, looking at EH&S and GRC capabilities, starting to see those usage. But just the fact that beyond the kind of the claim space, we're not seeing significant utilization of these other capabilities that a system brings, I think is a really good starting point for our discussion.
So let me just ask you a couple of
Sure.
questions
Yeah.
on that graph, if we could stay on that for a second. So, um, A couple of things jumping out at me right now. So first of all, most everybody's going to have obviously a claims use case for this. Most
Sure.
everybody's actually going to have a, policy management use claim for this, and certainly a renewal management. Not everybody is going to have perhaps a health and safety or a legal or
Right.
use case, and maybe they manage their GRC elsewhere. So, um, what kind of adoption would you like to see? Where do you think that this graph would be ideally?
Yeah, I think ideally what you'd like to see, and Scott, what you said that everyone would have a policy management use case, but what we're seeing is they're not utilizing the system in that way, and
Right.
there are reasons for that, right? I'm not an advocate that everything has to be in one place and in one system. If there are other systems of records that do well and integrate, that's great. But where I'd
Mhm.
like to see this is you'd like to see kind of all the way through exposure management over the 50% threshold. That would be my
Right. Okay.
expectation, that you're seeing that you're using it for some process of managing your policies and your renewal process, managing kind of the broader scope of the values and what your organization, the exposures your organization has. The other ones I think will come along, but there's a whole other field of tools that do EH&S and GRC and legal. So I wouldn't expect those, but when I kind of measure that 50%, I kind of focus on those first six categories on the chart.
That seems to make sense to me. One of the things that kind of jumps out as a surprise to me, I'm going to ask you if there's anything on here that kind of surprises you. I don't, so I'm not obviously subject matter expert in insurable risk, but when I talk to people who do manage insurable risk, the one thing that they complain about incessantly is the renewal process, right?
Oh,
Just what a pain that
yeah.
is. I have to keep my language clean. What a pain that renewal process is. You would think that that you would want to use for that process every automation tool and every software-based tool that you could get your hands on, so you wouldn't have to put yourself through the torture of that process every single time. Was that a surprise to you that there's maybe less adoption on the renewal side? And is there anything else that might have jumped out to you as a
Yeah,
surprise?
no, that's always a surprise to me, both in our survey and in real life examples, and talking to clients that are still managing. You can kind of group renewal and exposure management; they kind of go hand in hand as well. With policy, that renewal process, which is such for most organizations a very complex, tedious process, is still being managed. I'll say manually, using spreadsheets, using emails,
Yeah.
and this isn't a new capability of RMIS systems. The capabilities have gotten more advanced, but
Hmm.
managing your renewal and the value collection process of a renewal has been a key part of RMIS systems for as long as I can. I haven't been a vendor in
For way
15
back,
years. I haven't been
yes.
a vendor in 15 years, and we were doing it 20 years ago. So to still see such
Right.
underutilization in that area, and it's a huge pain point. It's a pain point that I hear all the time, and I would tell you that in you know a third of the projects we've done with organizations in the last 2 years, that's the leading use case in why they're choosing for the first time. These are organizations, and I'm
Right.
picking out your organizations that are using remises for the first time, that they're saying, we've gotten by with claims data from our TPA, but what's killing us is the renewal process. We're buried in spreadsheets, we're buried in versions of spreadsheets, and we're managing this whole process via email, and
Uh,
it's impossible. It really is.
Get me out of this renewal hell. Like that's that.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I'm hearing the same things. So
Yeah, for sure.
that's interesting. Yes.
All right. So good question though. So let's talk a little bit of what you should get from a REMIS. If you've got a REMIS, you're considering a REMIS, what are those things that you should be considering that would get you that kind of get you towards maximization? What are the things we should get out of this? So I think first and foremost, it's efficiency. These tools should help you do your job better, do all of, whoever's touching the system. And that's a discussion, a separate discussion topic on like who gets benefit from a REMIS, and we can talk about that in a little bit. The next area is I guess calling it transparency, or having kind of a single source of truth, a place that you can go and know that this is kind of your hub for all of your risk and claims data. And I'll say more than it's more than claims, but it's all the things we just talked about: having your renewal data, having all your exposure data. This is what, even if it isn't the source, even if it isn't the source of truth, that it's potentially the place that you put all that data, because there's we'll take the renewal as a great example again, right? So maybe that data, maybe the exposure data is collected in a finance system for you, and that's great. You don't need to duplicate that process, but we need to bring that data into the system so that it can help make the renewal process more efficient, because that's only one piece of the renewal. Only one piece of the renewal is collecting the data. It's then reporting it out to the providers, getting it to your brokers, the markets, etc. And then ultimately, the next step is really getting, this is where I think a lot of organizations fall short, is getting the insights that they can out of these systems. So they bring a
Mhm.
lot of data in, but they don't get a lot out of it. And that's where we find a lot of people kind of missing that opportunity to maximize their value. Is, they collect a lot of data, they spend a lot of money getting all this information in the system, but they're not getting enough out of it. So I think those are the areas kind of to focus on as we think about what are the core values of a system.
Great.
So let's attack maybe some low hanging fruit. I mentioned earlier I wanted to chat about kind of daily optimization, and there's a couple ways I think that can be improved upon no matter where you are. So the first is dashboards, and what we see a lot with organizations, particularly that an implementation of a RMIS is not the easiest thing in the world. It's not the hardest thing in the world, but there's a lot of work that goes on. And I find sometimes that there's fatigue in that process, with the clients, particularly as we get to the end of that process and going live. And we leave kind of I think ultimately the most important parts, the how we use the system to get valuable data out, we leave that till the end, or we leave it kind of as an afterthought. Like we put that in a parking lot and say, we're going to get to that later. So we've gathered all this data, we've put all this data in the system, and we've rolled out a couple of dashboards, and that's great. But is it really helping the organization and the different types of users that are in the system? So what we look at is, and I've seen many examples of this, dashboards that kind of have everything you could possibly think of. So Scott, you can be in the system and your data is there and my data is there, but I don't particularly care about what you're looking at, and you
Yeah.
probably don't particularly care about what I'm looking at. And this is an easy fix. This is one where if we spend the time and you look at, what are the roles? It doesn't have to be user by user, but think about it in roles: claims individuals, people that are responsible for renewal, the management team, maybe who you report up to, who risk management reports up to, what they would like to see, and then focus those dashboards on those particular areas, so that those dashboards can become the way I look at dashboards is that's the starting place for using these tools. That should be your landing page when you come in. It should be what drives your entire workflow. Should always be coming back to the dashboard and then launching from there into maybe your tasks that you're responsible for if you're a claims adjuster, or if you're the risk manager and you're looking at the system, always having your KPIs right in front of you, your total cost of risk, having all that at your fingertips. So going beyond kind of the basic dashboards that typically get rolled out, that's number one. The second area
So,
is, wait,
s-
go
so
ahead, Scott.
that's
Sure.
worth highlight. I'm sorry, that's worth highlighting because that's something that people can relate to in insurable risk land and outside of insurable risk land. That's
Yeah.
like a bullet point, but that's like anybody listening to this, no matter their background, can dedicate time to this. And the problem with these things, right, is that you tend to set them up once and then you
Yeah.
can never dedicate the time to evolve them,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So, it's an upfront lift, and it's like, when are you going to dedicate the day or two of time and concentration it's going to take to realign these things, make sure that make sure that other stakeholders have input and stuff like that. So, but it's necessary to your point, right? It's something that pays off in little increments every single time you use it. It's just a question of, okay, what do I have the discipline of setting up a certain amount of time on a certain cadence to get in there and evolve these things forward? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, we will, and we'll talk a little bit about some recommendations near the end of our conversation about how you go about that, how you continue continuous improvement. So, but these are the areas that you focus on. And if you're in a spot, wherever you are today, one of the ways to do it is just taking a step back and saying, okay, what are those things that we left on the drawing board, right? What are the things that
Yeah.
we parked during an implementation? It may be features, it may be an entire module. Maybe you decided not to implement policy on day one and going back and saying, okay, we left that so we could get live and start using the system, but let's go back and address those. And I don't have a specific statistic, but in too many cases, I'll get involved and see organizations that they already have the list. They have the
Yep.
list from that, go live day one that they've never got back to address. Everyone took a deep breath and they moved on to the next, we're back to our day jobs and using the
Yeah.
system for what it was initially set up for. Um, the second area, and this is one where there's been some involvement in the tools, so I won't completely blame the implementation process, but workflow automation in RMIS systems has really come a long way in the last, I'd say, 5 years. Technology. This is even before AI got layered on top of the workflow capabilities that are available. But I think this is an area where too many times people they don't figure out, hey, how can the system help me? How can it do things that are repetitive that the system could just alert me to? So I mentioned one in the dashboard earlier, like what are my tasks for today? So that it's not just ones that I've loaded, saying, oh, remind me in 30 days. So I put a little note on a claim, remind me in 30 days to review that claim. But where the system can monitor that for you. What are the claims? Focus on claims for a second. What are the claims that haven't had any activity in 30 days? What are the ones where the reserve was just jumped by the TPA by some percentage? That the system can automatically identify those. Other workflow examples, even outside of core users, where the system can notify, let's say a high severity claim is reported into the system, that it automatically notifies the individuals that need that. So it doesn't, you don't have to view that claim in the morning when you come in and then get on your email and send out notifications to everyone that some significant event might have happened. So those are two big areas. And the last, and I think it's another overlooked area, is how these systems can integrate with other internal and external systems, whether it's true integration, like through an API, or more likely, and what we see more often, is just bringing that data in. I mentioned that earlier, right? Having the system where it may not be the source of truth. The source of truth might be your finance system, or the source of truth might be the policy digest from your broker. But being able to bring that data in so that for your organization, all of that is in one place. And we don't just bring it in to bring it in so that I can look at my policies in the system. We bring it in so that we can integrate it with the other data pieces, right? So if we're bringing in finance data that might have the exposures for an organization, what I want to do is be able to compare those exposures to loss costs so that I can kind of put everyone on an even playing field, look at my loss ratios, quickly identify or locations or operations that may have high ratios that may not jump out right away when you look at it. Oh, a location only has 3 claims. Well, it's our smallest location, and 3 claims is a big deal with a small location. You may or may not get that by just looking at a kind of a, if you're only looking at losses. So looking at those other integrations, even if it isn't the source of truth, the RMIS should be that hub for all the activity that takes place for the risk management department.
Sure.
So some other quick wins. Some of these quick wins we've talked about already. So I won't berate the topic of dashboards and notifications. But I think the other area for some quick wins and areas where I think sometimes RMIS systems start to not get completely maximize the value is around the data itself. So this is something that whether I would urge organizations as they're looking at new data sources or they're implementing a RMIS for the first time, that they're really spend time making sure that the data that they're bringing into the system is good. That they take the time up front to cleanse the data, to get it accurate, because you bring in bad data, you're just going to compound the problem, and you're going to find that you're going to lose the trust in what the system can do. So having that, making sure that your data is accurate, some of that can be cleaned up in the system. Ultimately, going back to that wherever the source is and making sure that it's accurate. So that if you're, an example we see a lot is the data coming from a TPA that the location structure doesn't match up, and there's not a really good way to map it. Making sure that they're using the right, whatever the codes are, that we have a way to map the codes, or that in some cases I've had clients where location's not a required field from the carrier or TPA, which blows my mind. That it would not be a required field, but making sure that the processes are in place, that it is, and that they have the most up to date. So the other thing we see a lot is they have a structure and then the locations change and the carrier TPA doesn't have those updates. So we're getting a lot of miscodes and mismatches. So getting that data right. Another easy win beyond dashboards is also scheduling reports. I know it sounds pretty basic, but it can solve a lot of problems, particularly and share a lot of information with users that may not otherwise be looking at this. So this is an opportunity to share data maybe with people outside of the users of the system. So pushing out reports to leadership, pushing out reports to operations people in the field, so that they're getting real time data, and those can be in dashboard format. And depending on their access, if you do provide them access, those reports can be drillable, so you can drill down into the system if you wanted to. But at a minimum, it's giving them that snapshot of what's going on. So in a lot of cases, what we find is organizations are utilizing these systems internally, and then they're sending out reports as they're requested, instead of identifying what would be, the how do we create a set of reports that satisfy the operations. And maybe in a lot of cases they don't even realize what they need, right? So it's an opportunity to say, hey, here's the insights that we can share from our system that would make a location leader or an operations leader have the right information in front of them. So when they're making decisions and making decisions on where they're going to do business, on what safety protocols they have in place, et cetera, giving them access to that data. And then one last kind of quick win, and RiskConnect, good example, right? You're putting out new features, new modules all the time. Maybe in these quick wins, features is a better way to look at it. Keep on top of the new things that are coming out, and look for opportunities and things that didn't exist on the day you went live, that you may want to implement today, that might be able to provide value to the organization. This is an area where I think we're in a really interesting place right now, because there's so much new technology that's being deployed in RMIS systems, artificial intelligence, other advanced analytics, that just didn't exist for most cases, for clients that were implemented, say, even 2 years ago. And so just keeping up to date on that, keeping that relationship with your vendor to understand what's coming, what are those things that might make a difference that we're doing manually right now, or maybe not doing at all. So those are some quick wins.
Great.
So let's talk maybe a little deeper. So we've talked about, being more efficient, getting the data right. I think the next step is really talking about how you can get deeper insights from these systems, from your RMIS system. And if you've got the right data in place, and you start thinking about, okay, what are the key metrics that drive my organization? What are the key metrics that I as a leader have to be paying attention to keep us moving forward in the right direction? This, I think, is the biggest area. I mentioned this earlier. I think we really fall down on, which is we gather a lot of data. We put workflows in place. I think we do a pretty good job of getting workflows in place. There's always more opportunities, but really driving that the system is providing insights into your program, um, into kind of the activities that are taking place in your business. And this gets presented typically in dashboards, but it's going beyond just kind of the regular charts that you would normally see. T-Core is a really good example, and we've got a Risk Connect example up on the screen. I think T-Core is an underutilized metric within organizations. And I think it can really show a much broader view of your how well your organization is performing in the risk management area, right? So if you're only focused on claims totals, and claim values, or you're only focused on what our policies cost us and our renewals, that doesn't give you the big picture, because there's lots of metrics, or lots of levers, excuse me, that you can pull that change that dynamic, right? So if you raise your, if you raise your deductible, you're going to have more loss costs, but you're going to hopefully drive your policy premiums down. If you're not looking at that more holistically, you're not really getting a good picture of, are you making the right decisions? Are you being effective in your job? So I think figuring out what those insights are, what those KPIs are for your organization, and what you're focused on, are really important to start driving it out. And this takes time, right? It takes you've. I wouldn't say that this is always a day one objective, because you have to get the data in the system. You have to have it. You have to have kind of that basic blocking and tackling, and that's, I think, when you take kind of that next step. And this is an area where there's a lot of great and new capabilities coming out, um, with technology that can support this. A lot of the advanced analytics and predictive modeling that's available today and starting to be rolled out in RMIS systems and other systems that we use, really has the opportunity to help kind of hone in on these insights.
Right.
So let's talk about some of those just briefly. Here's another chart from our RMIS report. If you're sitting there thinking, and I have this question a lot, is, I'm not really doing a lot right now with some of these more advanced capabilities, AI. You wouldn't be surprised. You're not alone. We find that most organizations are really in the early stages of adopting these, particularly AI capabilities, natural language processing, generative AI, et cetera. Predictive modeling has been around for a while. Risk Connect has had predictive modeling built into your models and your system for many years. Sometimes organizations don't realize what they're getting from the system as that kind of engine behind it. But you can see from the chart, and the way you read this chart, you read it left to right. So the dark green, that first color, is people that have reported that they've already adopted these capabilities, whether it's Gen AI or predictive modeling, workflow automation. And if you go across, the way I read it is kind of go across to that light greenish blue before the yellow starts, and it shows where people feel like they're going to be in the next 3 years. What's really interesting here, and we typically see with these advanced capabilities that we do the research on, is that they kind of start to tick up. The green bar starts to move further to the right. The people are starting to adopt them. The 3 year horizon starts to go towards that 50% mark. Gen AI is a really good one. It was one of those fast out of the gate. So second year on the chart, we didn't ask it before that because it really wasn't a thing 3 years ago, and it's now jumped to the top. At least is the way this is sorted, is by that kind of likely, already adopted, extremely, and somewhat likely. Those first three bars is the way that this chart is designed, and it really shows, interesting, right? That people see the opportunity with Gen AI. We're already seeing capabilities built into RMIS systems that can do that. I do think there's a little bit of some misleading data here, and sometimes it's just people understanding what these systems can do. Yeah, I mentioned already kind of the predictive modeling. A lot of times there's predictive modeling that's behind the scenes that you're already utilizing and you don't realize it, right? So if you have
Right.
risk scores on your claims or on your policies within your RMIS system, that's predictive modeling. That's already in place. You may not be thinking, well, I didn't go and specifically consider a predictive model that I might be able to use to manage or more effectively understand my claims. You probably have some of those capabilities. So I think there's some things here that might be just generally a little underreported. Workflow automation is one of those, Scott, and I mentioned this to you before the call, right? We used to just call
Right.
it robotic processing automation, which is a term only you and I really know what that is, or us tech geeks, right? No. And so it finally hit me when I'm like, it should be at the top of the list. I mean, even if it isn't fully utilized, and we've talked about that earlier as kind of one of those quick wins, um, it's got to be higher. So I think this was just a matter of people kind of understanding what that is. And so we quickly moved into
Yeah.
the, number three position on the poll. I still think it's probably a little higher, but I don't think that this is way off. And I think what we will see, the reason we have this list today, and this list changes year by year, depending on, things drop off as they become standard, and new capabilities like Gen AI, as I mentioned, we add to the list. Um, I expect that we'll see more adoption of these capabilities, particularly when not just organizations already use them, is when they're integrated into their core systems, because that's what we're hearing a lot from organizations. Is what they're saying is we're starting to identify our use cases. We know where we want to start, but we want it to be part of our core RMIS. We want our RMIS to provide that. We don't want to have 14 other, we don't want to be cutting and pasting stuff from our RMIS into ChatGPT to summarize adjuster notes, as an example, right? We want that integrated. And some people are doing that. I think where we'll see the adoption take off is as those capabilities become standard capabilities in a RMIS. And there's just so much to build right now. I don't fault Risk Connect or any of the vendors right now where they are. There's a lot of technology right now that is exciting, and we're just at the cutting edge of what can be done.
Yes, I agree. And I think that the way that you are reading this data is particularly insightful. You and I could look at this and say, okay, well, you know, uh, generative AI is actually a subset of large language models. So
Yeah,
you can't have one bigger than the other. But yeah, so it's recognition driven. Everybody knows what generative AI, like if they're using generative AI, if there's something that's creating words from unstructured data. I
right.
recognize that. I see that right in front of me. So
Yeah,
I get that.
that might be another one where definition is a little better. Maybe large language models maybe drops off next year, and we'll just go with the broader Gen AI term. I have to
Right.
think
It's so
about that.
hard to it's so hard to tell because you change like what you like the RPA thing is a great example. You change
Yeah.
one little word or one
Right.
little framing of this
It had a
and it
huge jump. I
drives
can't I
everything
can't sh I
cattywampus.
can't show the year over year because there's this huge jump, and it's just, yeah, we probably didn't explain. We were a little too technical for our own self. Just one little fun note, Gen AI the year before, the first year we put it on that chart. So right now, if I'm reading this, I should know it off, less than 10% of organizations say, and extremely unlikely that they're going to adopt it. That number was like 25% a year and a half ago, which is kind of
Yeah.
funny. Like, I get it, back then it was so unknown and new. Even the fact that, well, this was January, but just even today to think that 10% of the organizations felt like there's no way we're going to use it, and many organizations are maybe bootstrapped a little by the fact that their organization may have you know policies around how these tools are used. That's another one of the reasons why I think many organizations are waiting for their core systems to integrate, because it's not a workaround
Yeah.
around a policy, but if it's integrated as core capabilities, you find many organizations, getting to ChatGPT is just, it's locked.
Yeah.
Until they have kind of their own version that they know the data is secure, that they don't have access to that.
One last point on this.
Yeah.
This is something that you and I were discussing offline here, but it's also interesting to note that a lot of the adoption of some of these functionalities might not be a choice of the user until it's made available within the RMIS.
Right.
In other words, the way the question is framed is how much adoption are you, the user, planning on, right?
That's right.
But that might not, the bottleneck to that is, well, sure, I'm open to it, but it has to show up in my RMIS somewhere first before I
Exactly.
can do it. So three to
Yeah.
5 years or whenever it shows up.
Yeah, and we get a mix of, power users, regular users, decision makers that respond to our survey. So, they all probably have their own view of kind of where that is, and maybe different ways to slice and dice the data as well.
Very good.
All right, so we're going to move to adoption, because all of the things we've talked about, and the ways you can get more out of it. I think adoption is probably one of the biggest issues with. I think data is a big piece of it, but I think adoption of these systems is one of the areas that really holds organizations back to getting the most out of this. And I think there's some common challenges that organizations face. You can see from our chart, and it's easier for me to read on my bigger screen. You
Hmm.
see costs are some of the biggest ones, right? Implementation costs, budget or resource constraints. But then you get into, some of the more tactical things. There's resistance to change and using these systems. There's lack of executive buy-in, and we'll talk about that in a moment on, kind of how you manage this on a ongoing basis. But I think it comes back to, in a lot of cases, lack of the right amount of training and onboarding or onboarding users, right? We go live and we turn on the systems and we teach them like where the features are, right? These buttons do this, this is how you run a report, but really don't spend enough time really understanding how they can use the system to be more effective. And it comes back to some of the things we talked about earlier, right? Understanding how these systems can be more effective for groups of users, different sets, like if it's claims adjusters or risk professionals, et cetera. And there's ways to address that as well. Um, the other area, I think, all of these systems and Risk Connect is not unique in this space, is there's so many features, and that's a great thing. And there's even more. Every quarter there's more capabilities, and the systems are getting complex. And I think I hear a lot. I hear it in the feedback on our survey. I hear it when I talk to organizations. There's frustration with that, which you think that's kind of funny. We're getting frustrated with more capabilities. But what happens is, and I find this, I'm in these systems all the time, and I've been doing this for a long time. You'd think, oh, I know my way around these systems. I'll find it, and I get frustrated, like, oh, where is that report, or
Where
how do
is
I?
that thing?
Yeah, where
Yes.
is that thing? And a lot of people just like, so they go back to just getting the basics out of the system and not really focused on, you know, how I can improve on that. And there are ways you can improve that. You can turn on and off features of the system. You can streamline it. Having, again, starting at a dashboard for a lot of what your activity is, so you can always come back to home to kind of start that process is really important. But I also think kind of having a governance process over the, not just, most organizations do this during implementation. They have a key group of stakeholders that are managing and giving input, and if that's done correctly, at all levels of the organization and all levels of the users, they're going to get the features they need. That has to continue. It isn't, you said it earlier, right? It isn't a one and done. And there's certainly time to take a breather, and many organizations may be in that mode right now. Yeah, we implemented some time ago, and we really haven't addressed anything since then. You need to keep whatever that governance process that's right for your organization in place for your RMIS to get the most out of it. And it may be pared back from where you were, but having key stakeholders involved, looking at this on, I would say, a quarterly basis, it would roll in really well with those new feature releases that typically come from RMIS systems on a quarterly basis, and also addressing, at least on an annual basis, what's changed within your organization, what's changed within your department of the areas of your focus. Because a lot of times, and rightfully so, we implement these systems with particular things we have to do, use cases that are the most important. But 2 years from now, those use cases may have changed, right? You used to self-handle your claims, and now you use a TPA. Have you changed the way you're using the system to now manage that third-party data? You're bringing it in, but have you changed those key metrics that you're looking at? Have you changed the way you're using the system? So all of that is very important. Training, ongoing training is important, and I would say even less training as understanding of how you can use the system to do your job more effectively. So it's almost like mini adoption sessions, understanding like, okay, what are you trying to accomplish? Oh, let's change this. That's how you build those dashboards I talked about before. And I'll make a plug. I think one of the great opportunities, for a couple reasons, are the conferences that the Risk Connects and other RMIS vendors hold on their system. What I find is and for two reasons. One, you get to see a lot of capabilities that you may or may not ever be exposed to. My favorite sessions, and those are the things that my clients don't use a lot. I go to sessions where I'm like, oh, that's interesting, or that's new. I want to see that. But the other thing that comes out of those sessions is you meet other users that are using the systems maybe in interesting ways that might apply to your organization. So whether that's the conferences or just having, in our space in risk and insurance, right? There are local RIMS chapters, there's industry chapters. having conversations about how you're using your RMIS system and learning kind of lessons learned from other organizations, I think is a tremendous opportunity. But you can't ignore these systems. You have to continue to improve and be always kind of focused on. You may come out of one of those quarterly meetings and say, "Hey, it's status quo. We're good," and that's fine. But the fact that you're going through that process is really important. And I may have already shot this one as we just talked about it a little bit, but it's a continuous. I'll just touch real quick. It's a continuous process, right? It's not just one implementation. You need to be looking at what are those areas. You can use this as a really good example of those items that kind of get left behind, and they get left behind for lots of good reasons. Probably, not a priority for our organization. That's a nice to have. Well, once you've got the system really doing everything it can in that one area. So if we go all the way back to that first slide where we talked about utilization, we've got the claims management piece. It is humming. We're getting the reports we need. Our claims supervisors or whoever is managing the claims process, whether it's a TPA or your self-handling, has all the tools at their disposal. Now it's time to start looking at that next step. So if you've left renewal behind or you've left collecting your values and your exposure data, now it's time to look at that, figure out how the system can do that. What are the data sources we need? Make those changes. And again, a continuous process. I think on top of kind of that governance model that I mentioned earlier, stewardship with your provider is key because they're going to have those other, just like I mentioned earlier, kind of hearing way other organizations use the system. They're exposed to so many different implementations that they can bring these ideas to the table. So you don't always have to be the expert. What you need to convey is what are we trying to accomplish? What are the roadblocks? Not system roadblocks, but what are the things that my area of responsibility is struggling with the most? And once we've figured that out, now we figure out what are the solutions we can bring to bear on that. So you don't have to be the technology or the RMIS expert. It's great to have one. It's great to have someone who's kind of taking leadership with the RMIS. You're likely going to have a system administrator, but that person may not be at kind of that more strategic role in the organization. Being able to convey that and have that type of relationship with your vendor, that you're a partnership in figuring out kind of where we go next is really important. And then so let's tie this back to ROI. I think that you touched on it at the beginning, and I think it's something you always have to keep in mind is how do we get the most out of what can be a considerable investment. And I think again, if you focus on the areas that we've touched on today, how does are these is your system is it helping us be more efficient? Is it improving the way we're doing things? Have we put automations in place that improve processes? Are we reducing cost? Is it affecting the way we're managing our claims or managing our policies? What are those key drivers? And this is the area, you could have kind of a mini, it's almost like a mini total cost of risk on your RMIS, right? What are your costs? What are your drivers? Are we mitigating risks? What are the ways that the system is helping improve the way we manage risk and understanding what those outcomes? I think when you start to get to this, we get to be, it's not just a data repository, but helping the system get to a place where it's much more of a strategic asset for an organization. That's when you start to hear, I think that's when you really start to get the value. And that's something that I don't hear enough of organizations that use a RMIS tool is that they consider their RMIS a strategic asset. And I think that should be the goal of these tools. You spend a considerable amount of time and effort and upkeep in these systems, and it shouldn't just be sitting there collecting data and not really getting a lot of value out of it. So moving it in that direction, moving the needle in that way, again, no matter wherever you are on that needle, moving it in a positive direction is very important. Real quick, couple things, just some areas of growth. So one of the questions we asked in our survey was, what are areas that are not supported currently? And it goes back to a lot of the things. I wanted to show this at the end because it talks about some of the same things we've talked about today. on where we can make improvements. But these were the top 7 or 8 areas where organizations said, this is where it can really help me that we're not doing today. So analytics and predictive modeling coming out at the top, workflow automation. So even though I said it may be misreported, organizations recognize that that's an area for improvement. It's an area where we can get more. And this may be that, the question says unsupported. It may be that it just hasn't been implemented. The tool may, most modern RMIS systems can do all the things that are on this screen. It's a matter of, have you implemented, have you optimized these tools to get the most out of them. So I won't belabor all the points up here, but I think it reinforces kind of the areas of focus, and it not just comes out through the survey, but it's the same as we hear in our practice when we help organizations kind of get the most of these tools. So let's wrap up with just a couple more things. So if I had some recommendations, just to kind of work back through what we talked about today, the first I would say is, and this starts wherever you are in this process, whether you're at the beginning of a journey with a REMIS, or you're well into a, REMIS, and you've been live for many years, but maybe it's been sitting there and you're looking to get more out of it. Make sure that the tools you have are aligned with your goals, your strategic goals for your organization, for your business, for the way your group operates, so that it's supporting you, that it's not just kind of this tool that, yeah, we collect a lot of data in our RMIS, but to we don't use it when we make more strategic decisions. It isn't our go-to source. um, that's something we hear far too often. The next area, improve on that user experience, whether it's making the system easier to use, building in these workflows that we talked about, or giving the end users the right tools and training to get more out of these systems. Um, Enhance the data, integrate more. And these are steps. I would start at the beginning. I don't think you can kind of jump in and just say, oh, we're going to go right to advanced analytics. Make sure that you've kind of taken these steps one at a time, that you've implemented, and then you can get to the point of the more advanced analytics, and ultimately leveraging the AI capabilities that are starting to appear and be part of these core systems. I think we're going to see a tremendous amount of capabilities in over the next 18 months, from RMIS tools like Risk Connect, in this area. And if you don't have kind of the other building blocks in place, you're not going to be ready for them. If your data is not where you need it to be, if your users aren't fully trained and the system's not aligned to your organization, those AI tools are not going to be useful to you. So get those building blocks in place wherever you are in this journey, kind of start making those moves forward. And then finally, I think we hit on all of this today. I think focus on that daily use. I think there's a lot of low hanging fruit that most organizations can find. Talk to your core users, find where areas where they're not using the system, where it maybe makes sense. Well, why aren't you asking? That's a question we ask all the time, is, so why are you doing that outside of the system? Why are you not utilizing that? Why aren't you starting? I'm a big fan, again, I've said it a couple times, of starting at a dashboard at all times. Why aren't you leading with a dashboard? Why are you just kind of in the claims module all the time? Because that just gets you a place where you've got to do searching and know what you're looking for. Um, Figure out how you unlock those analytics, really get the system to be a strategic tool for you, and continue to improve. This isn't a one and done. It's a huge investment. Make sure that you're looking at new features, you're looking at the way your organization's changing, and the things that maybe you didn't do as kind of the highest priorities on day one. And then ultimately align this with your organization strategy. I think they sound simple, and this takes time, this takes investment. Um, but start to think about it, and consider these things as you go through your journey with your RMIS system.
So thank you for starters. Thank you. This has been incredible information. This dynamic of continuous improvement you're talking about, I might be able to contribute one modest thing here, but this reminds me of an analogy from my experience. In the past, I've done a lot of work with startup founders, serving as a business mentor at 1871. And one of the courses that I give talks about resilience and anti-fragility when starting a business. And the pushback I get a lot of the time is that, well, this is nice to say in, it's continuous improvement, this kind of always building. That's nice to say in theory, Scott, but we are so booked up with clients and business and so
Yeah.
running around with chickens with our heads cut off that the leader of the company, a non-programmer, have had to learn programming in order to be able to supplement all the work that's being done. That's stupid on several levels, but what there's a principle I think that the time it takes tasks to get done will fill to take up any space that they are given. I forget whose law that is, but
Yeah.
there's a certain principle of that. And so there's a certain principle about resilience, but it applies here too to the continuous improvement that you're talking about, that time has to be carved out ahead of
Does.
time before the volume uh, of activity grows to expand everything. You have to kind of create safe spaces around that time, or it's going to get swamped by the volume of your day-to-day work. Is that something that you find when you talk to customers, and is that familiar to your experience as well?
It's familiar. It also sounds really familiar the way I run my own organization. And I fall, Scott, I
My
fall into that.
department too, dude.
Yeah, I fall into that just quickly. I fall into that same boat sometimes too, where I focus too much on the day to day and not the things that continuous improvement. And I've learned to carve out time to do that, so that because all those little things start to add up, and then it's almost it's overwhelming that you can't address it. But yes, I hear that all the time. And one really simple thing, and again, this continuous process, this governance, this ongoing, it can be as simple as just a quarterly call. And so I
Yeah.
facilitate some of those with my customers, where we have an hour and a half once a quarter on the calendar. It's booked for the year. We jump on a Zoom call, and we all chat about kind of where the pain points are, and sometimes we get into little issues that have to be addressed, and it's not as much continuous improvement. But ultimately we try to identify those opportunities. Sometimes, again, we keep a parking lot, because even quarter by quarter, you don't always address it, or you might put something on the list. I'll give a great example that came up with one of my clients I'm thinking of right now. We've been talking about AI use cases with this client for about a year. And it came up on one of these calls. And on the next call, we decided we'd invest some time on what are some of those use cases. Again, forgetting about what systems you have in place. That sometimes the hard part is like, I don't know if it exists. Don't worry about that right now. Tell me what you're trying to solve for. And sometimes, I didn't say this earlier, but I say this. This comes up a lot. A lot of times when you identify those use cases, particularly if you're focused on AI and what it can do, the answer is not always AI. It
Mhm.
can just be workflow automation. So just aside to that if you just put it out there, what those use cases are. But ultimately, what we decided was we then parking lot those use cases, because there were other things in front of us, including better data that had to be cleaned up. This was historical data that they just till we got the historical data cleaned up, the predictive modeling that they wanted to do was just not an option. But we
Sure.
revisit that list. So I'm the keeper of that list for this client. Other clients, it's the system administrator, or maybe the leader of the organization, or the department. Um, it doesn't have to be this, because if you look back at the whole process of implementation, that can be overwhelming. That's not what we're
Yes.
looking for here. We're looking for more of a, just these are touch points. Is everything working well? Hey, and sometimes it's like, hey, I need a new report. Well, that's great. That's an improvement. You're making that improvement. And then bringing your vendor partner into the process may not be in all the calls, but a lot of times, again, I'm referencing a couple examples of my own. The follow-ups lead to conversations with the vendor, right? Saying, hey,
Mhm.
here are a couple of things we identified. Can you help us with this? We're doing value collection for the renewal, but we're still struggling with a couple of key areas that are there tools that can make that more effective? And a lot of cases, yeah, it's if we tweak the way it's implemented, we'll get more out of it, or we'll fix kind of that bottleneck that we've run into. So again, I think make it And it doesn't have to be quarterly either, depending on, your setup. Maybe it's you do this twice a year. Maybe you do it once a year. I think it probably should be done a little more often than that, but it doesn't have to be a 1 day offsite session. It just, something that keeps this top of mind, I think is probably the most important thing to keep in mind.
Well, that's a great piece of advice, and that's a great place to leave it. So I want to, Pat, thank you so much, both for joining us and for being with us here today. Thank you so much for sharing this information. And to you also in the audience, thank you very much for spending an hour of your day with us. We appreciate you very much, and we will see you on the next installment of Risk at Work. Take care.